Just got, yes, we're recording now, so they should have a little pop-up that says you're okay with the recording. Just checking the number of participants in at the moment. Oh, and nice to see sort of friends and colleagues there. Alex, I noticed you there. It's been a while since you've dropped in, but I've visited your website recently. Very good, very impressed by that. Deb, nice to see you here. And I see we've got Stephanie as well. We've got 12 participants at the moment, and obviously we've made a start. Um, uh, there were nominally 25 people that have enrolled, registered on this. So just give it a minute. What I would like to say, however, is I've got some uh, congratulations here to Stephanie Mason. She's there. She hasn't got a camera on at the moment, but Stephanie passed her Viva recently. So, Dr. Mason, welcome to this meeting, first one with your title.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And have we got yet Sarah? Because I think this will be Sarah's first meeting since she passed her Viva too. Although we have said I've congratulated Sarah separately, I think via LinkedIn. Okay, right. We've now got 12. I think we should make a start. You will notice, and I'll keep posting it into the chat bar because unless if it's posted before you join the meeting, you won't be able to see it. But I have posted the agenda, the running order. So we've got welcome and introductions from 3 o'clock at 10 past. So that's only 5 minutes away, thereabouts. Um, we have and of course as comments go in, I lose my agenda, so I'll scroll back again. We've got the presentation. Now that's normally 40 minutes from Denise. And then at 3:50, there'll be a discussion in breakout rooms, only for 10 minutes. And we'll probably have, depending on the numbers, if we have something like the 20, it'll be about 5 breakout rooms. And that's a chance for you to say hello to fellow participants and have a bit of a discussion. And then you can just feedback informally at 4 o'clock. So we can have a further discussion and feedback for about 10 or 15 minutes. We'll see how that goes. Then 4:15, we've got any contributions or updates from anyone that's joined um, the meeting, just on your research endeavours. So, Alex, I'd be particularly interested, for instance, to hear about your current research again informally, and then if you don't get an opportunity to discuss that, we do have another rig where we can definitely put you in and possibly onto the agenda. Um, so, other business, we've got the Belmas Myers proposed book series. We've got the date of the next two meetings as well. So that's our running order. So what I would like to do now, if that's okay, is to introduce our speaker for today. I have great pleasure in doing that. And so Dr. Denise Misford. So I'll just introduce Denise from the bio, and I've changed it a little bit, Denise, and I've added a couple of bits and pieces. So Denise Mifsud is Associate Professor in Educational Leadership, Management and Governance in the Department of Education at the University of Bath. Her research interests are focused on critical perspectives in educational leadership, especially distributed forms, school networks, social justice, policy generation and enactment, and teacher education. And all these areas are situated within post-structural Foucauldian theory. Denise has many years of practitioner experience in educational settings in both teaching and in top-level leadership roles with the Ministry for Education in Malta. In addition to higher education experience in Malta, Scotland, and England. She has published in several international top-rated journals in addition to monographs and edited volumes. Besides journal editorial roles, Denise has also held voluntary leadership roles with BELMAS and with BERA. She's also a convener of the International Collective for the Study of Michel Foucault and Educational Leadership, Administration and Policy. What was missing in Denise's biography actually is her latest book, co-authored with Richard Nisha, entitled Thinking with Michel Foucault in Educational Leadership. And that was published by Bloomsbury as recently as January. So that's quite an impressive biography, I think. It took quite a while to read that. So if I could hand over now to Denise, and we're really looking forward to Denise's presentation. So over to you, Denise. Oh, might I ask everyone, if you haven't already, to just mute your microphones, because there could be a lot of us and it might cause a little distraction with feedback. Thank you very much. Denise, welcome.
Thank you very much, Andy and Rosemary, for this very generous invitation to present to the governance and governing BELMAS RIG. So, what is school governance? Findings from the literature. Today, I'm going to present, findings from a systematic literature review, that I conducted with Andrew Wilkins, from a paper that was published in July 2025. What I would like to do, and I'm glad to see that Andy had already proposed breakout rooms, is to problematize the concept and the notion of school governance, and to get you to discuss and think critically about this concept. So, an introduction to school governance, although it doesn't need an introduction. This is just an introduction to put you in a critical mind frame. So, governance has been designated as a contested and complex territory, giving rise to further ongoing debates about its meaning and application in the public sector, including, of course, education. School governance refers to the patterns of rule concerned with regulation, direction, and procedure. There is complexity, diversity, and interdependency in the formation of present-day school governance systems. Why? School governance is a field of action and dissension, occupied by many actors that may include teachers, politicians, teachers' unions, local authorities, government departments or agencies, volunteer organizations, public companies, community members, guardians, and school governance. Thus, school governance is often regarded as overloaded, overcomplicated, and overlooked by some. The increasing complexity surrounding school governance discourses thus led us to consider the polyvalence of the concept, as well as the slipperiness around the language of governance, due to its meaning being continually stretched and adapted in ways that make it appear as a detached signifier. Moreover, by pointing to the polyvalence of governance, We do not make any authoritative claim to the proper conceptualization of the term, nor do we claim that there is a privileged method or approach to studying governance. The vagueness or lack of consensus surrounding the concept of governance can be attributed to its complicated history and language. Our approach to the study of school governance is therefore located within a strict understanding of schooling, used to refer to the way school leaders and governors pursue certain institutional and ideological means to maintain accountability of their organization as custodians of education services. Now, have you ever considered school governance as a subfield within the educational leadership management and administration field? Because that's how I regard it myself. Traditionally, it has functioned as a subfield within the broad educational leadership management and administration field, often being obscured within the wider and more conspicuous ELMA literature. In fact, previous systematic literature reviews of research on educational leadership and management in specific geographic regions point to a gap in the topic of school governance. For example, a systematic review by Hallinger and Chen, covering close to 500 journal articles in the field in Asia, reveals that school governance constituted only 8% of the publication, despite featuring as one of the 6 main common foci. School governance-related articles make up 11% in a similar systematic review of 500+ publications in Africa by Hallinger. Notwithstanding the burgeoning and increased interest in the topic of school governance by both researchers and policymakers since 2000, no comprehensive reviews of school governance research have been conducted. The research questions guiding these reviews were: what are the general trends of the school governance literature published between 2000 and 2023 in terms of volume, geographic distribution, and publication outlets? And what is the conceptual structure, that is, the topical foci, frequently used concepts, and how they are applied, constituting the school governance field? I will tell you soon enough. Now, methodology. I'm not going to go into brief details about the methodology, because you can read about it at your own leisure, okay, in the paper. I'm more interested in presenting the findings and the concepts to be able to generate a discussion. But briefly, although this paper presents a quantitative analysis to show the distribution, publication outlets, volume, geographic locations, etc., it has a more focused qualitative thrust, adopting a critical narrative synthesis approach. Now, in terms of identification of sources, Web of Science, Scopus, and Google Scholar were used as the search engines, and to identify the dataset of publications, the PRISMA search approach was used, okay, the preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analysis. There were a number of inclusion and exclusion criteria that were followed, mainly that to be considered for the final dataset. The articles had to be specifically education-focused. They had to cover compulsory schooling, that is, from early years to school leaving age 16. Only articles and review articles in peer-reviewed academic journals published in English were considered. The topic needed to focus on school governance issues, not simply be a case of the search terms appearing in the abstract. In terms of exclusion criteria, both further education and higher education were disqualified. In addition to editorial material, book reviews, book chapters, books, and conference proceedings, while publications in other languages besides English were excluded. Now, after the whole process, the database which we considered for this systematic literature review consisted of 361 journal articles. So that's my methodology. You can read in depth of the step-by-step process further on in the paper. Now, what about the findings? Here, I'm going to first introduce what I call the descriptive findings, as they might also, although they might also generate interesting discussion later. Now, what can you say about the volume, in the first figure on the left? So these are the documents by year. As you can see, research in the field was scant and sporadic throughout between 2000 and 2010, taking an upward turn in 2008, followed by a slight dip, but then rising again in 2014, with the biggest increase in volume observed post-2019, and another distinct leap in volume occurring in 2022-2023, which is all indicative of a consistent upward trend in the volume. Now, when it comes to an analysis of the geographical distribution of the empirical papers, we can see a gradual shift in the ELMA field in terms of global dominance and geographical incidence, leading the school governance research. As you can see, the United Kingdom emerges as leading in terms of volume of literature in the field, closely followed by the United States, South Africa, Australia, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, and Hong Kong. The rest of the countries that produced less than 10 articles were not presented here, as it does not fall within the scope of the review to list all the countries where empirical research was conducted, but only to identify geographical incidents and any evidence of global dominance. Our country unit analysis does demonstrate that research on school governance has spread beyond the English-speaking Western countries, revealing an internationalization of the ELMA field beyond the global north. That is publishing in the English language. A more diversified field in terms of geographical production may be observed were it not for the hidden literature phenomenon identified by Hollinger and Chen of the contributions of the field made by papers written in languages other than English being overlooked. Research in school governance published in English was carried out across the continents to varying degrees, led by Europe, followed by North America, Africa, Australia, Asia, and South America. This trend highlights the growing contribution from scholars located in what we call emerging nations, while simultaneously offering evidence of the increasing geographical distribution and diversification, hence internationalization of the ELMA field. However, it should also be noted that cross-country studies on school governance are still rare, albeit in evidence, in places with little evidence of international collaboration in the area. Now, what about the publication outlets? How does the dissemination pattern of the field look? Academics exploring school governance publish their outputs in various journals encompassing a range of intellectual traditions, and specialists sometimes practice-focused orientations in the field of general education. The South African Journal of Education was the leading publication outlet, with both education, management, administration, and leadership, and the European Education Research Journal, following the Journal of Education Policy and Management in Education. There is also the International Journal of Education Management, Education Policy, and Compare. Journals, we decided on a cutoff point of 7 or less applications, so only those which featured 8+ applications. Publications are mentioned here. So, the results point to strong evidence of the wide distribution of papers on school governance beyond those journals with a sole focus on educational leadership, which is a very interesting trend. General education journals lead the field, originating in South Africa and Europe respectively, with 2 leadership specialist UK originating journals following suit. Education policy journals, both UK and US based, are also featured, together with the specialized International Journal of Education Management, as well as a comparative education journal, being in the top 8 of our list. There is evidence, thus, that ELMA scholars are submitting to publication outlets beyond the specialist field, and also across the globe. So, that was sort of a description of the figures showing the incidence and distribution of the school governance literature. Now, I hope we will move to the more interesting part. A narrative synthesis of the 361 publications constituting the dataset enabled us to construct a conceptual framework. The main themes and concepts that have been explored in school governance literature published between 2000 and 2023 are the following. We identified theme 1 as participation politics in schools. The second theme as modes of autonomy and control in school governance practices and mechanisms. The third theme of this conceptual framework revolves around policy trends in school governance reform. Theme 4 deals with confluences and influences of global education governance impacting schools, while the fifth and final theme revolves around digital governance. in schools. Now I'm going to delve a bit more deeply into each theme. A recurrent theme that emerged in the publications was that of democracy, revolving around interrelated topics of parental involvement and student participation that we thus label as participation politics. Just to give you an example, the post-apartheid school governing body concept in South Africa gives prominence to parental involvement in education, considered an innovation in education management and leadership in the cultural context of developing countries, which is a stark contrast to previous processes where parents were handpicked, thus resulting in undemocratic and ineffective participation. The positive contribution made by parental involvement in school governance has been documented in various ways, like, for example, a positive correlation between the visibility of parent and community contribution and the subsequent consequences on teacher effectiveness and student improvement. Rural school parent engagement is also significant. However, there is also a thorny issue: the marginalization of parents in school governance decision-making, with their role as parent governance limited to being school financiers and builders of infrastructure. Parental involvement is also utilized as a policy tool. There are also some obstacles impacting, however, how parents navigate the field of school governance. For example, an inherent tension exists between values implicit to African traditions and gender politics and the values of modern school legislation. A related issue is also the attitude of teachers and school principals to parent participation in school governance. What is interesting is something we noticed about school governance in Hong Kong, that there are 4 phases of development in parent inclusion in school governance. They are regarded first as unwelcome guests, then as volunteers, then as clients, and then finally admitted as school governors with shared responsibility. They are also drawn upon as resources. Promoting student participation in school governance as a way of building democracies in schools and teaching active citizenship is also regarded as a means of forging community by some education scholars. However, including students is not always the case, as attempts to give voice to the voiceless through intentional democratic school governance is sometimes hampered by the silencing of learners' voices. These forms of implicit or explicit governance, as sometimes these forms of implicit or explicit silencing point to wider issues related to social justice and democracy. As in certain contexts, student voice and participation is discouraged rather than encouraged due to wider mechanisms which are against action, meaningful action leading to social change. Now, what about modes of autonomy and control in school governance practice and mechanisms. The issue of autonomy featured very prominently in the dataset of publications that we analyzed. The effectiveness of autonomy in relation to organizational performance is shaped by an amalgamation of internal and external contingencies as perceived by the school actors themselves. Notwithstanding the process of decentralization and stakeholders' perceptions of the locus of decentralized decision-making power are contested issues, with some authors arguing that no automatic link exists between decentralization and quality improvement. But I may ask you, who or what shapes school autonomy? We can see the presence of partisan preferences and teachers' unions that shape education governance reform trajectory. When there is a tension at work in the system between peripheral/school autonomy and central government control and direction. Can this lead to increased monitoring and surveillance of all school governing bodies? As a result, and a condition and effect of school autonomy? And what are the risks of school autonomy reforms? Depoliticization, corporatization, endogenous privatization, or disintermediation. School governing boards were also frequently discussed in the literature we analyzed, regarded by some as a measure of school autonomy. And the school governing boards were most prominent in South Africa, where their establishment was set up by a legal act, signaled as a willingness to encourage the principle of partnership in and mutual responsibility for education. Questions have been made about their effectiveness as a governance body, and also the role of the principals as a vital cog in the school governing bodies. What we noticed as well is that modes of autonomy preclude modes of control that take many guises in the school governance discourse. The conventional model is to be held to account, involving performance-based evaluation against set standards, thus expressing a hierarchy of authority. But then another model involves a dialogic process, encouraging practitioners to give an account rather than be held to account, thus encouraging learning and democratic responsiveness. I'm wondering what forms of governance you have yourself experienced or have had to enact. We also noticed that comparative evaluations of education systems have led to the rapid rise of inspection as a school governance mechanism. A lot of you, I must think, are familiar with the Ofsted inspections and other regulatory bodies. Now, what about Theme 3? policy trends in school governance reform. Are these control and accountability measures masked under the guise of school reform while being steered through the introduction of new policy instruments? Literature reveals traces of this in distinct degrees across the various national, local, and regional systems across the globe. For example, the landscape of educational control in the United States, it has been argued, is being reshaped in the post-industrial era, with the two most serious governance problems relating to the professional statist domination of school governance and the reliance on bureaucratic mechanisms to exercise control. Contemporary school reform in Norway uncovers two antagonistic reform strategies centering around external control and professional commitment. For example, school governance reform, however, is also influenced by the local context. And in the paper, we take recent developments in school governance in Ireland as an example, where the role of religious institutions in school governing is decreasing with a looming crisis in school patronage. However, Western welfare states, as is the case of France and Sweden, for example, differ starkly in terms of the degree of decentralization, with different forms of educational corporatism and the resulting patterns of teacher-union relations as crucial education players in terms of tight centralization and excessive decentralization. It is also a known fact that rapid and unprecedented changes in school governance worldwide were also triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic, with the major bone of contention with school governance at the outbreak of the pandemic revolving around decisions of school closure. These decisions were based on two alternative discourses. Closing schools was a preventive measure underlined by discourses of schools as places of infection, while keeping them open conceived schools as a place for social supportive measures. Global education governance has also been put to blame in the context of COVID-19, mainly due to its failure to defend and reinforce education as a public good and its public provision and regulation. What do you think? Now, theme 4. Confluences and influences of global education governance impacting schools. Global education governance, realized through key transnational authorities like the European Union, the OECD, and other international organizations, emerged as a prominent theme in our analysis of the publication dataset. The influence of evolving European Union governance on the quality of education and its positioning as facilitator of national policy reform for its 28 member states, with individual sovereignty in education policy formulation and enactment, has been discussed at large. It also results that the OECD has had significant policy influence, reinforcing its infrastructural and epistemological global governance through measures such as the Program for International Student Assessment, or as we all know it, the PISA assessment and PISA studies. international organizations' legitimacy in global education governance is commonly regarded negatively as a function of their regulatory or prescriptive power, with research focusing on the role of the OECD, UNESCO, and the World Bank and their coercive and regulatory mechanisms. Now, the fifth theme, digital governance in schools, okay, which was really like a growing topic due to several reasons. Now, the digital education governance appeared via issues related, for example, to artificial intelligence, which I think has increased much more since 2023, datafication, digital infrastructures, software systems, and computational education policy, among others. New or novel, rather, digital technologies for the collection, analysis, retrieval, and display of data activate new spaces of visibility and forms of school-based managerialism. For example, European education governance is also deploying digital technologies, more specifically websites, to mold and publicize its education policy, thus portray related interplays of absence and presence, enacting specific spaces into being, and calling for specific ways of taking action upon the reality they purport to represent. AI and big data provide essential innovation and a great potential in school governance, transforming both the formulation and implementation of education policy. However, they also pose a series of new dangers and perils that can be observed in the institutionalization of new governance practices that emerge with digital technologies. Well, I believe that the last point in itself is the topic for a whole new governance and governing rig meeting. So that was the conceptual framework that we come up with from analyzing our dataset. So what are the implications of all this? Several insights which emerged are worth highlighting. Of particular note is the sharp rise in the production volume of school governance research post-2014, following an upward trend commencing in 2008, with the biggest increase being observed post-2019, most notably in 22-23. So, what led to this rise, in volume? My think. This may be attributed to trends in the governance of schools in England, relating around the tension in the governance of the whole system between enabling institutional autonomy and ensuring control, as well as the sharpened focus on improving institutional performance. At school level, these would be translated more specifically as the drive to improve school performance and pupil attainment, the influential growth of inspection bodies, the increasing diversity of and conflicting roles within governing structures, as well as the changing influence of stakeholders. Most of the dataset of the 361 publications are made up of empirical studies that constitute over 77%. which shows that academics are engaging with school governance issues in the fields. Another interesting note is the geographical distribution analysis. While the Western world still dominates the field, South Africa has presented itself as a very strong contender. This development challenges Challenger's 2018 claim of the uneven development of the global ELMA knowledge base, where literature analysis highlighted most published sources of knowledge coming from a limited set of English-speaking, largely Western Anglo-American societies. Additionally, in South Africa, school governance research became prominent following the established post-apartheid legislation in 1996, which decreed democratic engagement of stakeholder groups in local decision-making. Publication outlets are also interesting to note, with general education journals rather than leadership-specific journals leading the field. Publication outlets are also going beyond the Western world, with the South African Journal of Education being the leading journal. Notwithstanding the expeditious progress of school governance scholarship, there are gaps, okay, that need to be addressed, and which I invite you, okay, as members of this ring, to think about. I know that Andy mentioned that the next meeting is going to be about a book proposal, and I hope I haven't misunderstood. So, like, this presentation today could give you some food for thought. It is timely for researchers in the ELMA field to focus more specifically on school governance issues among the wider ELMA field. Cross-cultural studies on school governance are still very scarce, not to say inexistent, with little evidence of international collaboration unfolding. Also, notwithstanding the global education governance emerging as a strong theme under the guise of the European Union, the OECD, and other international organizations, the focus of the publication's review were on the emerging EU education governance and how the introduction of various measures by the knowledge economy are steering school governance in general, rather than a specific focus on how disease affects different countries. Specific studies of the effects of this, what we term global governance, on education systems in both the global north and, where applicable, global south, would yield interesting results for policymakers considering making governance more local and contextual. We also noticed that digital governance in schools is a burgeoning topic, which started being explored pre-pandemic in relation to school database managerialism, developed as the only way of education provision during the pandemic-induced school closures, and is now continuing due to the new forms of AI. We also assume that this theme will expand, maybe like the RIG members can do something about it, due to the new risks and threats attached to datafication and automated management of school operations, including issues related to data protection, privacy, confidentiality, and the rights of the datafied subjects who are mainly children. Another interesting point we noted was the vast number of publications in the area of higher education. So, a systematic review of publications covering governance issues in university is considered very timely. Future reviews on the topic may even try to include the hidden literature by including databases in languages other than English in order to explore related literature in non-Western, non-Anglophone contexts. Future research may also consider critiquing the notion in terms of its applicability to global South contexts. Now, of course, this systematic review has limitations, as all review studies do. Due to the very particular focus of this systematic review, only published literature exploring governance issues in compulsory school contexts was considered. Further education and higher education were left out. We also excluded any book chapters, conference proceedings, thesis, as well as grey literature. We also acknowledge that different exclusion and inclusion criteria determined by different authors would have yielded different results. And this all leads to the arbitrariness of decisions on what to include and what to exclude. Another limitation is that we targeted solely and specifically English language journals. Thus, incorporating publications in other languages besides English may lead to distinctive outcomes with regards to global geographical distribution, something which I'm very curious to see. So, I'm going to end the presentation on this note. This systematic literature review has thus determined, we hope, the expansion and development of school governance research after the turn of the 21st century, attesting to the fact that school governance may indeed be overloaded and overcomplicated, but definitely not overlooked. Thank you very much for bearing with me, Andy. I hope I haven't gone beyond the 40 or 45 minutes that was assigned to me. I don't have a watch, and the PowerPoint presentation is hiding the time on my screen. For those of you who would like to read more in detail, and even maybe read further and access the reference list, this is the reference of the paper, which is available open access. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, Denise. So I've lost the screen. I've got a pop-up. Without this.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thank you, Denise. That was so interesting. I don't know how many people have actually read the paper or in any sort of detail, but it is a very exceptionally detailed paper. So much in it, and for me too, and I guess a lot of researchers, because it is a systematic review, the references there are so solid, really interesting. This page, I don't know how many references are there. I don't know if you listed the 320 references, but it is very solid indeed. Cynthia, we've got an opportunity now to discuss the presentation. I noticed, however, that oh, that's better. I've got my screen back. I was talking to a blank screen there. A number of our colleagues stayed for the presentation, but have just left. So that leaves only 9 participants now. So how many groups do we think we want? We had originally looked at 3 or more, but if we've got nine. Should we go for what, three groups so we can have some detailed, involved discussion there? Is that okay? So, Cynthia, would you be able to, yeah, Abdullah's got a thumbs up there. Right, so you've got a pop-up now inviting us to join a breakout room, and that'll be for 10 minutes. And then we can come back and feedback, ask any questions to Denise, share our observations on the paper and what Denise has had to say. So we'll just hop into these now and join the groups for 10 minutes. Thank you.
Hi again. That's good.
Pinged back.
We're back, Danny.
Oh, we're the first ones
Hi.
again.
Right.
Right, we're all back.
Yep, we're all back.
That's
Hello.
great. I think it's always good to have a smaller breakout room, isn't it? You can really
Yeah.
discuss in some detail. And I think we were talking about our next meeting actually, starting with a cup of tea in a breakout room, because that's what we used to do when we met in person, didn't we? And have a
Yeah.
chat and catch up informally. Have 10 minutes of that. You can chat to new colleagues and then make a start. So great that we're all back. Can we had three breakout rooms. So could we hear from breakout room one? It's just informal. Anyone from the group? Any observations, questions to the group and Denise, who was in?
It
What
was,
were we
yeah, it was, we were one, right, Danny? Yeah.
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 We were room
So-
three.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, we had a quick chat about Danny's work as well, quite interesting. I mean, this is the beauty of breakout rooms. Danny's work was about school governance, and so I was very interested in, which kind of about Denise's paper on, and that so some interesting themes I thought, for example, we were just beginning to discuss the idea of Denise. You made a reference to culture, possibility of cultural, intercultural, perhaps communication, that sort of thing within governance. That would be quite interesting because of not just globally, but even in a single nation like the UK, England, and so on. There's so many multi-ethnic communities collaborating, interacting with schools, and therefore how the schools deal with intercultural communication. I saw a hint of hope there as a possibility to, when you mentioned, Denise, that element. And one final thing we discussed was I thought because of the exclusions, Denise, I'm sure you mentioned that we may perhaps, do you think we can get there's a possibility to get a fuller picture of if we included non-English papers, even in places like America, there's a lot of papers written in Spanish, and whether we can get there's a kind of perhaps interested in getting even a fuller picture of what it is, what themes are discussed across the world in educational or school governance or educational governance. Now, that's one thing, it's interesting you use the word school governance. And we know school sector is the biggest sector, but there are interesting patterns across all sectors for the education and higher education governance. So I think it would be quite interesting to do a similar piece of work across educational governance. Yeah.
Okay, Denise, it's not so much a question, more of an observation really, in terms of there were English language papers and there were 1,300 of them. Yeah. Anyone else from group one?
Danny, do you want to say?
Yeah, there were only a couple of us. Well, there were only two of us in
sure.
group one, but that's
Just
yeah, no,
informally, just any
yeah,
observation?
no. I mean, it was really interesting. I was just sort of, I mean, I think comparative stuff between countries is really interesting. I kind of wondered if possibly because my own work has been so focused on the sort of detail of what actually happens, but some of the comparative work, it doesn't look very closely at the processes that go on, and I know other researchers have sort of said that, you know, the risk of making assumptions that things work in a certain way when actually reality is that they don't. So I think it made me think about, you know, comparative work that looked at closely at processes would be really interesting. That was just my passing thought.
Okay, anything from group two? And then Denise, you can come back once we've had a number of observations. Anything from
I guess
colleagues?
group two is Alex and Kiko and I. And Kiko was interesting because she's based in Japan. And so we were talking about the different, she was interested in the complicated structure that is English school governance now. And because she's looking at doing a comparative study and using England. So, and we were just talking about how incredibly complicated and messy it has indeed become, and what the whole question of what is governance anymore is one that's a bit fraught, isn't it? So, and there were a couple of things that I was interested in, and then obviously Alex, I'm sure will have a point to make. But I was very interested in the fact that there was this spike in interest in producing papers about governance. And I wondered if that was mirrored by perhaps a general feeling, I don't know, in government and in education as a whole, that governance was elevated as a part of leadership, whether that carries through. And I'm not so sure about that, but it's quite interesting that there's that spike in interest in academic work, isn't there? And also, I was very taken with your I think it was in point 2, where you talked about South African boards, and that the idea of the school governing board being seen as a partnership within with the school leaders, I suppose, in terms of that bringing that community partnership together. I thought that was a really interesting aspect of it, because I think that's sometimes lost. And thinking forward to our next meeting, when Sam Henson is going to present that latest NGA report, where he talks about, which I really like the phrase of having a governance literate education system, where that real understanding of the benefits that governance can bring. I thought that partnership idea in South Africa kind of began to sort of express that in a way. So some really interesting things. And then Alex, you're interested in that sort of structural issues, aren't you?
Yeah, and I've actually got a couple of questions. I thought it was really interesting looking at the comparative study. I'm interested in the English system. So you talked around, well, it's about the nomenclature of local governance, really. So you talked about school governing board for that local level of governance. But did you find any specific differences identified in the literature in relation to the autonomy of school governing boards as a comparison between maintained schools and multi-academy trusts in England?
No,
That's a
like
good
there was
answer.
specific. So you can go ahead and do your research. First of all, I was surprised at the fact that school governing bodies, let's call them like SGBs, okay, emanated as such a, how can I say, a distinct issue, okay? There was a lot of prominence. But most of the focus was in South African literature when it comes to the school governing bodies.
Right.
and also how they were introduced, but no, the issue you mentioned didn't come up. So I'm looking forward to like reading what you publish about it.
That's really interesting. I'm surprised actually. The other thing was you recognise this lack of attention given to the work of school governing bodies, particularly in the MAC context, and I think particularly in relation to your first three themes in your conceptual framework. Those are participation politics, so and Andy's area, practices, and then policy. There are tensions for the head teacher in those aspects, particularly. And traditionally, head teachers were ex officio within a robust and consistent structure common across all English state schools. But more likely now, they sit within their local governance structure with no consistency in those structures between different multi-academy trusts. Did you find this area ignored in the literature? Or is their role simply as agents within whatever structure they operate?
No, how can I say, the tension or the exact role of the school leader or the head teacher within the school governing body did come up in the literature.
Sorry, did or didn't?
No, it did come up.
It did come up.
It did come up, yeah.
In fact, to quote you, you talk about head teachers being the cog, the pivotal cog in the boards. And had we had more time, I would be discussing that, because colleagues know my own view is that it shouldn't even be a governor, because I don't think you can govern yourself.
No.
But yeah, it did come up in the paper. I don't know what page, but I did make a note of that.
That's interesting, Andy, because obviously, in a multi-academy trusts, they might be called a governor, sit on their local governing board or governing committee, but they're accountable to the trust board. They're accountable to the exec team within the multi-academy trust, not to their local governing body.
Absolutely. So where they were the pivotal governor and the cog, it is no longer the case. It's the
No.
CEOs now that are take that role. Yeah, absolutely right.
You got
We've
your
lost
mute,
you,
Andy.
Andy.
On and off, in and out of mute. I'm just aware of the time because it's 20 past and we've got 10 minutes. We've got a couple of announcements and also some contributions. Have we got anyone who wants to make a contribution? Just as a brief update on their research. If you just put your hand up, then we'll do that. Just help us with the time. If anyone does, there's also the next meeting, of course, where we could give you a longer period if that was the case.
Yeah, I mean, I just recently published a paper, but it's not. It's not.
Oh, right. No, I wouldn't take it now. Okay. Well, I can come back. It's just in order to manage our time. Okay, we'll take any sort of a last question or observation to Denise if there are any then, and then we'll move on to the contributions. Any last comments, observations for Denise? Well, we've had a bit of a thorough discussion.
No, it's all good.
All good. Well, I'd just like to thank Denise then for her contribution. If you haven't read the paper, really do, go in and delve into it. I found it a fascinating paper. Denise, it was a brilliant piece of work. I don't know how you generate so much material. I mean, that had a very impressive paper only last year, and you must have been writing that at the time you published, you were writing your book as well, because that was published in January. I hope to read your book before too long as well. So from all of us, thank you for that presentation, and we'll certainly look out for your next pieces, your next work.
What next?
Yeah. What is next? What is next?
I have a lot of
and I noticed that was with Andrew as well, who is a friend of all of ours, Andrew Wilkins, and I think that was your second paper with Andrew.
Yeah.
Second one. Okay then, being aware of the time, so thanks, Denise. Being aware of the time.
Thank you very much. And I look forward to you taking this discussion further, like in terms of publication And the comparative study, looking at the actual processes, not just comparing governance statistics, etc. The issues that Alex raised with the role of the head teachers within the governance board, within the English schooling context, and yes, exploring education governance more widely rather than school governance. So I look forward to reading more about these. Thank you very much. I leave
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Bye.
Look forward
Bye.
to your book as well.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
off
Bye.
again, Andy.
Yes, right. Thank you. Just a couple of announcements then. We've been working with Belmas and Myers Educational Publishing in the States. And there was a conversation. I wasn't at the conference last summer, but just to update you that there's been ongoing discussions, and it looks as if we will have a book series that will be launched. So there's 5 rigs at the moment, and we're about to put out a call for abstracts for chapters. So just watch this space. At our next conversation, the conveners, so Rosie, Abdullah, Lizana, and myself, will be discussing the book specifically on governance and the focus that it might have, and we'll put a call out for abstracts for chapters. The time frame essentially will be planning the book between sort of now, next few weeks, up until July, and at July at the conference we'll have some idea of the shape of our own book, and we'll know which other rigs will have made significant progress on the project, and then it would be writing and editing for about 6 to 8 months. So we're not trying to coordinate the books between the rigs, but that's the sort of time frame, and therefore publication, I would think, would be for us maybe next Easter. So watch this space, and we will be putting out a call and registrations of interest to be involved in the book. We also want it to be inclusive, so rather than like enormously long book chapters, we'd want it relatively short and punchy. So we would have, I don't know, 8 or 10 chapters, so there's a bit more of a contribution and inclusive between members. So that's the first announcement. The second one would be our next meeting. Rosemary, would you like to come in here? The date of the next meeting? It is in the chat.
April or something. It's in
Let's
the
have a
chat,
look.
isn't it? I haven't got my diary in front of me.
Okay, so the next rig would be Tuesday, the 14th of April at 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we've got, as you
And
mentioned,
that's Sam Henson from the NGA is going to talk about that report they've just brought out, which I found really interesting, actually. And you know, in terms of my work, some of the things that they're talking about there about the need for government to invest in governance, and I really love that phrase about having promoting governance literacy amongst in the education system, really. And my work has a lack of understanding about what governance is and can do. It features very strongly in my work. So I think that would be a really interesting session. And yes, anybody else who would like to present, then we'd be more than happy, Andy, wouldn't we, to hear from some of you who are, currently working or have just submitted your PhDs. I know some people who've done that, who are on the call,
as well. Yeah.
So you might have work that you want to talk about. Yeah. So get in touch with us if you do.
Yes, please do. So that's the next meeting, which is Tuesday, the 14th of April. And then we've got to be confirmed but an in-person rig as we held last year. It was very successful last year. I thought
Yeah,
there
it
was
was
almost
nice.
30
It's
of us,
good.
wasn't there?
It's good, yeah.
So the proposed date for that is Monday, the 18th of May, and it would be the same format as last year, 12 till 4. We'll confirm the venue, but I suspect that by that time we will have some idea of colleagues that would like to participate in the book, and then we could be sharing our ideas for book chapters and getting some feedback. There might be other one-off presentations, but yeah, I think it would be a great opportunity for us to come together at that time. So that would be the next, the one after.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Andy,
so
just a quick question. I wonder if the current small group of participants we have here would be willing to share their contact details amongst ourselves. I mean, do you think it's an idea to see if people are interested in sharing, Alex, Danny, and Stephanie, everybody else? Yeah.
absolutely, yes, we
And
could
I'm
do
quite
that.
happy to share my details. Yeah.
Yeah, are there any objections? No? Yeah, that's a good idea. And I think, Cynthia, we're not in a position to share Belmas members' details either, and particularly those in the rigs. And I think we're working at that, aren't we? We're looking at being able to contact all our colleagues within the same research interest group.
And when new
Right, in
people
terms of
join.
oh,
Sorry.
sorry, in terms of the conveners can share each other's details, but we're sort of slightly bound by GDPR about sharing other people's details. But an email went round to ask conveners if they if they were giving permission for other conveners. So that had been shared a few months ago.
Okay, thank you for that, Cynthia.
Okay.
Well, it just for me, are there any concluding observations? We're right on time now, so I'd just like to thank you all for attending. It's been a really interesting session. It was great to have uh, such an involved presentation, and Denise hasn't joined our group before, so that was great. Thank you for joining, and I'll look forward to seeing you at the next meeting, if you can make it, which is the 14th of April.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
Brilliant.
Rosemary. Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank
Good
you,
to see you
everyone.
all.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.